Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink. Pleased to be joined this week by one of our favorite guests. I like to have him on at least once a season. He's an Iowa basketball legend. He now works calling games for the Big Ten Network. Jess Settles, welcome back to Podcast on the Brink. Good to be talking to you today.
Alex, man, one of my favorites. Appreciate you, and it's always great to be on and talk to the Hoosier Nation.
So, Jess, it was we were talking a little bit before. It was good to hear you on the game the other day. Indiana, not a great performance against Merrimack, but they obviously come away with a win. Struggled a little bit in the first half, played better in the second half. I think this is obviously the first IU game you had this season, but you've also seen them a little bit. What are your early impressions of what Indiana is this year as a team and kind of their outlook in your mind the rest of the way?
I love their front line. Race and Trace and now Geronimo. They're tough guys and they play well and they stuff a stat sheet. So there's a lot to hang your hat on right there. They're chiseled veterans. They've been through a lot of wars. I think all of them could have left. You look at Race, he didn't play a ton his first couple years, and you have the coaching change, but it seems like everybody else would bail in that situation, but he stayed and stuck it out and wants to wear the uniform. And TJD is, for a new coach, for Coach Woodson to have him stick around, that's just huge. I mean, you need a star level player that first year. So your program is just not gutted and you're not totally rebuilding. And then Geronimo, the sky's the limit some nights for him. He played probably his best game as a Hoosier the other night. We probably didn't give him enough love on the air, but a good athlete, can get above the rim, obviously, play with some physicality. So I like that part of it. As you know, and I'm sure all your listeners know, it's just really going to come down to point guard play, whether they have a great season or not. Johnson, I think I said on the air the other night, is a very coachable kid. He's just extremely emotional. And when you're on the road in the Big Ten or you're in these games that come down to the wire, which it seems like 90% of them do, he's just going to have to play a lot better. And that's really going to be the key for him. And a lot of it's going to be on him. And a lot of it is on every point guard in the Big Ten. You just have to get great play from that position. Finney, need more points out of Finney. And he's capable of that. He plays with good composure down the stretch. He's a good defensive player, but need more composure. Need more scoring out of him. But it is nice also to see, a couple shooters and Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart. It's nice to see an Indiana team with some shooters. They're just going to have to get over these mental hurdles on the road and winning these close games. And I think once they do, they can have a good year.
When you look at Trace, two-part question, how surprised were you that he came back for another year just based on the fact that he probably could have at least got, a two-way contract in the NBA or maybe even picked last season? And second, what are the biggest improvements that you see in him now compared to where he was a season ago?
Well, I think it was an extremely wise decision, and I give a lot of credit to the coaching staff in Indiana, to his parents, to whoever's in his corner, because there are so many guys, and I don't know, and maybe I don't think he was guaranteed a two-way deal coming out. It's not a pretty picture when you have your dreams shattered and you don't make an NBA roster and you end up playing in the G League in front of 20 people, living in hotels that aren't great and traveling by bus to games and things like that. Would you rather do that or would you rather play for Indiana? Now with Coach Woodson, you sit down with him and you say, look, I know where you want to go, and I've trained so many guys in your situation. This is by far the best place for you. And so I'm very happy with the decision just for the kid. These guys have to do what they want to do, and we don't live their lives for them. We all know that, but that was just a wise decision all the way around for him to get better. If you're not going to get first round money, then it's a big risk to leave. Where has he improved? he's just more physical. He's just more mature. He's just older. And I think he's more. I think he's on a mission. I mean, you come to Indiana to win championships, and I think he's on that mission. He's playing at an All-American level, and I think as analysts we can dissect his game and say the things that he does wrong or that he doesn't do. But if you look at him through the positive lens, he's a guy that everybody would want on their team.
You mentioned the point guard play. That's to me like in the preseason I got some blowback from IU fans. I'd had to do like the preseason media poll, which I think they show on TV every so often this season, just to kind of give a preseason glance of where the league was going to end up. And I picked Indiana 8th in the conference in the preseason. And I thought that was fair just based on the unknowns of, a new coaching staff, how they performed in previous season. But, the biggest thing that went into that in my mind was the point guard play. And I just didn't know necessarily what they were getting in Xavier Johnson. Obviously he was a player that was put up a lot of stats at Pittsburgh, but wasn't always consistent. And you mentioned the emotional side of things. Do you think that's just going to be something that's kind of going to have its ups and downs with Indiana throughout the season? And what correlation do you think their play and their results are going to have to how Johnson is on a game-to-game basis? Because to me, it was like the game at Wisconsin, he was really good the first half, and the second half he was 1 of 10, and they blow that big lead and don't win. To me, that was a big reason they weren't able to win that game. It seems to me like you never want to say as one guy goes, the team goes, but in Indiana's case, I feel like a lot of their success this year is going to be tied to how Xavier Johnson plays.
I totally agree. And it's tough. The Wisconsin loss was brutal, right? If you're a Hoosier fan, that's a game that you have to win. Obviously, there are a lot of scars there with the losing streak, and the kids played so incredibly well in the first half. I mean, I thought their staff was on point. They ran a lot of those pin downs on the corners with trace and race, and forced switches and forced hard hedges, and then would slip them for easy baskets. I think the first couple possessions, they took 15, 17-foot jumpers, and Coach Woodson said, look, this is what Wisconsin wants you to do. We've got to get deep into the paint. We've got to attack. And they did. And they responded, and it was drive and kick, and it was open threes, and it was elite defense, right? And then, the second part of the movie was a horror film. I mean, it was just they were playing not to lose, and everybody got a little tight. And so those are those moments when Johnson has to calm everybody down, and yet, Davison kind of gets under his skin, and the crowd's into it, and you start attacking and throwing things up around the rim, whether it's floaters or lobs that just are not there, trying to push the break late when all you care about is running clock. That being said, there were, if I remember right in studying the game, I think there were 4 or 5 guys in the last 5 minutes who had opportunities to make plays close to the rim or have open threes who didn't hit them. So, I know those kids are a tight group and there's no pointing fingers, but the level of expectation in Indiana and the weight of that uniform is heavier than any other place. And so you're going to be scrutinized. There's more glory there and there's more scrutiny there. And hopefully that will never change as a fan. But Johnson and Finney and Christian, they're going to have to play a lot better and a lot tougher and a lot smarter the entire season. And I totally agree with you. It's going to be basically on them. We know what the forwards are going to give, and there are inconsistencies for us big guys. I mean, we don't have the ball all the time, but there is just something. And you know what's interesting, Alex? I asked Coach Woodson on a Zoom 10 days ago this same type of question. I said, in the NBA, in these last 2 or 3 minutes, you're sending in plays, sometimes 2 or 3, and these are the best guys in the world. I mean, these guys have played thousands of games. A lot of them are all-star level. These guards they're so experienced. How is it different? Because I think this might have been after the Syracuse game. And he said, well, it's totally different. because the expectation for a guy who's making a living doing is you put in the play, all 5 guys are on the same page. They know the counters. You rarely is an NBA guy not going to get a shot. And then he talked about the end of that Syracuse game where I think late they called a timeout, came in and didn't even get a shot up. And he just said, look, that's, and all good coaches take responsibility, even though, give me a break. As a former player, you get the shot up, right? I don't need my coach to tell me where to be and what to do, but that's the college level kid. That's the young kid. So I think that, he's going to have to coach a lot more intensely. Everybody's going to have to repeat things a lot late in those situations to make sure everybody knows where they're going to be, what their assignments are, who's going to take the shot, what the counter is. Those are just things that are going to be different for him. And that Syracuse game in Wisconsin, maybe that showed up. Again, on the other hand, coaches don't shoot free throws, and they don't do power moves, and they don't have the ball in their hand.
Home Field produces the world's most comfortable, premium licensed collegiate apparel out of its headquarters in Indianapolis. Run by IU grads, Home Field studies Indiana's history to come up with the most unique apparel designs available for Hoosier fans anywhere. Our current favorite at Podcast on the Brink is the 1987 National Champs t-shirt commemorating IU's last national championship at the Superdome in New Orleans. And it's not just Indiana apparel available at Home Field. They're constantly adding new schools to the over 120 currently available at homefieldapparel.com. With the holidays just around the corner, now is the time to beat the rush, and Podcast on the Brink listeners can save 15% off of your first purchase at Home Field. Use the code BRINK15 at checkout to save 15% off of your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com. What do you think it is about playing at Wisconsin that's so difficult?
Well, I can't speak for it very well because I did not play in the Kohl Center. I played in the old boxing arena, but it was nuts in there. I think the last time I played there was Michael Finley and Tracy Webster, and you got to go way back for them. But they make you beat yourself. That's what they do. They don't gamble. They don't go for steals. They're never going to lead the league in steals, right? They're going to get back, and they're going to make you shoot jump shots. They're going to wall up, and they chest into you, and they're very well trained at that. They're going to make you feel like you're open underneath, and you're going to go up, and you're going to leave it short. And they're going to, they have a great crowd, and they're just going to grind you and make you uncomfortable all night. And most teams, what Bob Knight used to, point this out too. Most teams will end up beating themselves. Most teams will do that, and that's what they make you do. And for some people, it's not pretty. It's not something that they want to record. But when you win like they do, you have to give them credit. Most teams don't win there. But that being said, the other night was just brutal, right? I mean, Indiana was the better team for most of that game, and it's a game they should have won, and they didn't.
Parker Stewart and Miller Kopp, I want to ask you about those two guys as well, because they're two guys who also seem to kind of go in and out of the game in terms of like getting shots and the thing that kind of, maybe this goes back to point guard play too. It's like these two guys are shooting really high percentage from three, but they'll get 2 or 3 possessions in a row where they get a shot and then they don't do anything for 10 or 15 minutes. It's like they're not out there. It's interesting to me that both of those guys are obviously capable players, but they don't seem like they're capable really. Maybe Stewart is more like this than Kopp, because Kopp can do it a little bit, can't really create for themselves. So what do you think kind of Indiana maybe needs to do to get those guys going with more consistency? Because we've seen in certain points of the season where you have both of them going, you have Trace getting the ball inside, looking out for shooters. I mean, that's a pretty nice combination in terms of pick your poison offensively, but it just seems like there's some inconsistencies with both of those guys, and I'm curious what you observed watching them, and if there's anything you feel Indiana can maybe do to keep them involved more consistently.
I've always thought, you talk about tough point guard play is, and they're the quarterback of the team, and the physicality of the Big Ten and stuff. I always thought that those wing shooters, I always thought that was the toughest position to play in basketball at the college level, especially like you just mentioned, if you can't beat guys one-on-one or you can't put it on the floor. So you're totally relying on the flow of the game, on other guys setting you up, on inside out kicks, on getting open shots. I don't know. It's tough. It's just really tough to have to knock in jumpers and do your job with jump shots, because some nights you're not going to shoot it well. And then you just can't do a lot of other things with the basketball. And it is what it is, right? It's just, you can't get the ball and drive in and score over guys who are quicker than you or longer than you. I think they're just going to have to have packages for them. And one of the assistant coaches is going to have to almost keep their eye on the clock and on the live stats. It's like, hey, Miller Kopp hasn't had a shot for 3 minutes. We have to run the Miller Kopp package on this play. Parker has not had a kick out. We've got to run that play. And obviously in these non-conference games where you can kind of manhandle and bully teams and get up 50, it's a little different in those. But in conference play, even in that Wisconsin game, if I remember right, it seems like they left them, and they needed shots at the heart of that when things were falling apart, because they're such good shooters. That would be my 2 cents worth. Just packages and have some guy charting it, and if they haven't had a shot for a while, then make sure that Johnson knows what he's doing on that next possession. You mentioned these non-conference games, and with Iowa, they've not played the toughest schedule early in the season. Indiana's played a lot of these games. What do you think is play? Do you think how do you think this impacts a team just in terms of their development? Is it good in some instances to play a lot of these games to work on things, or do you think long term it really kind of stalls your development as a team if you're not challenged very often early in the season? Yeah, I think it stalls your development as a team and a player and as a fan base and everything. I don't mind playing some of these games. I get it a couple days before Christmas when everybody's needing to get home, and I get the first couple games of the year when you're trying to figure out your team. You have a lot of new faces. I totally understand the pay for play deal where these small schools a lot of times are in the coaching tree of the head coach, and these guys want to take care of their old buddies and give them $100,000 to fund their athletic department. I understand all of that, but we come to the Big Ten and we come to the power conferences to play against elite competition, and there are not near enough of them anymore. And when I was growing up, there were so many of them, and it was must-see TV, and you had to watch the game. I got excited. I think you tweeted out a couple of days ago that they're going to play Kansas in a home and home. Like, that matters to me, and I'm going to be all over that one. I think I talked about on the broadcast the other night, these neutral site games, they're just not working, and nobody gets excited about them. And I'll tell you what motivates a lot of it, and it's weird, is you talk to these assistant coaches or these directors of basketball ops at a lot of these schools, and you would know about this more than I would on the net and the quad one and quad on all this stuff. But a lot of these guys are literally setting up their schedule and based upon a net ranking and anticipating where they will be the following year and who's going to transfer to their team, so that you have a team that you are guaranteed to beat, but yet their ranking and their net will give you points when it comes to the end of the year to play. Now, you got to be kidding me. I mean, you've got to be kidding me, but it's true. And I talked to them about that. Now, when I was a coach at the NAIA D3 level, I have to admit, I'm trying to set up my schedule for success as well. And I'm trying to manipulate it as well. I can't control my conference schedule, but I can control everything else. And it wasn't near the same as this, at the Big Ten level. But I'm telling you, there's no way the coaches can do this without being totally biased and totally setting it up. And it ends up, it hurts the players, it hurts the game, all of these things. But I don't see it changing. Do you? I mean, I don't see it changing. a 40-point win at home against a team that can't compete against you. I'd like to see that twice a year, not 9 times a year.
Well, the other thing is now with the Big Ten going to 20 games, these coaches, and I get it from a self-preservation standpoint.
Yep.
You know, you realize that for the most part, unless you're going to win the Big Ten, you've probably got to win 11, 12 games in league play to make the tournament. And that's hard to do on a year in, year out basis. I mean, there's only going to be, half the league that finishes like that. And so they're looking at it from the perspective of we have to schedule 7 or 8 wins to get our win total to look good enough to get in the tournament. I think who suffers is, I do feel for a lot of these people that are paying season ticket prices to see 7 or 8 joke games. Like it's fun to come watch your team play and win, right? But when you see the same thing over and over week after week, some of these schedules, I get like you have to play a couple of these games, but some of these schedules are just embarrassing in terms of how weak they are. But I don't know what the solution is because the Big Ten's, 20 game schedule now. So you only got 11 other games to work with. In some years you've got the Gavitt games, you've got the Big Ten ACC Challenge. How many more games are you willing to take? Because you realize that, what if you're 500 in non-conference play? Then you've really kind of put yourself in a position where you have to be really good in the Big Ten to make the tournament, or at least get a seed. That's kind of my 2 cents. It's not the right attitude maybe to look at it, but I'm just trying to rationalize it from their perspective. I'm not saying I like it, but I think that's kind of what plays into it all.
Absolutely. I mean, there are 3 or 4 different angles to it, and you're exactly right. I mean, it would have to be done at an administrative level. You can't, the coaches are never not going to do what's best for their program, for their kids, and for themselves. I get it. But, I remember my freshman year, we played Grant Hill and Duke, in Carver Hawkeye Arena. And then I think we played Ohio U at Gary Trent. I think they were top 15 in Carver Hawkeye Arena. The year before, I was a senior in high school, but the year before Iowa had traveled to Cameron and played. And it was just, that's what you did. We played Ray Allen and UConn and Chris Collins and Duke at the Great Alaska Shootout, and always were in the, the Maui or the Rainbow. And it seemed like you were playing against the top 5, top 10 team 3 or 4 times of a non-conference. Now, maybe looking back, we didn't as much, but yeah, I mean, we talked about Kentucky and Indiana not playing. I mean, my goodness. I mean, from a fan standpoint, that game means so much to all of us in the Midwest, let alone you guys in that crazy basketball world over there. I mean, it just means everything. And then you have, the Big Ten teams won't go down and play a Missouri Valley, Indiana State, UNI, Drake. They won't go to their place and play. Now, if you're a coach, you'd be nuts to do that. I get it, because it's game of the year for them. But you wish that the NCAA tournament and the qualifications and all the rank, you wish that would maybe solve that, and you wouldn't be punished or concerned about a loss like you are now with all those numbers. So yeah, you know what the other thing is that's crazy about it? If you're a basketball fan like we are, and especially in the Big Ten, all of those individual records and team records, but are kind of sacred to us, right? I mean, Calbert Cheaney, I believe, still leads the Big Ten in all-time scoring. So, okay, Calbert Cheaney, that record of his is going to be in jeopardy one of these days, because you're going to have this really good player who's not good enough to be in the NBA as a first-round pick, but he's going to stay a long time, and that guy's going to play what? 8 cupcake games a year times 4 or 5, and he's going to score out of his mind several nights. And I don't know, we're ranting here, right? But it's going to skew all those records of some of the legends who actually played against real severe competition and things like that. But I don't see it changing, man.
From a Big Ten perspective, the league at large, what are some of your early impressions of just the strength of the conference? To me, I don't know. Like every year, I wonder, is it better than it was the previous year? And I don't know that I have a good answer at this point in the season. But it seems to me like the two teams that I'm looking at that are better than what I thought they were going to be in the preseason are Iowa and Wisconsin, and the teams that aren't maybe as good as what I thought they were going to be. Obviously, Maryland had some turmoil early in the season, lost some games maybe they shouldn't have lost. Mark Turgeon is gone. Good luck to Maryland to see who they come up with. That we'll see if let's just say we'll see if they get a better coach on the other side. That'll be interesting to see. But Michigan to me hasn't been great so far. I picked them to win the league, and I've been quite frankly a little disappointed in how they've looked so far. But I think they have a chance still to get things together. I'm just curious, just from your perspective on the league at large, what you think maybe about some of those teams that I mentioned and how good overall maybe you think the league is this season.
Well, it's interesting on a couple of those teams you mentioned earlier. It's always exciting as an analyst or someone like yourself in the business. You never know if a guy's going to step up who's supposed to take that next step. Johnny Davis at Wisconsin. I mean, my goodness, right? He's a star. I mean, I think he's going to be a lottery pick if he wants to be. He's that good. So I didn't see that coming at that kind of level. Wall's pretty good, but Johnny Davis. I mean, we talked about the collapse of Indiana the other night. Johnny Davis hit an incredible shot in the corner to win that game. So he's elevated them. And then Iowa, coaches don't like to say a total rebuild, but Iowa lost 4 starters from last year's team. And Wieskamp is a pro and I think led the league in 3-point shooting. And Luka Garza is playing for the Pistons and was National Player of the Year, I think, leading scorer. So you think that's going to be a struggle. So you're right. Well, then Keegan Murray, you think a kid's going to, like Johnny Davis, maybe give you 12, 13, and 8. Well, he comes out again against a pretty soft schedule, but still exploded out of the gate, averaging close to 30. And then Michigan, that team Mike Smith was the point guard last year, the transfer, but he must have been really, really good. I mean, everything must have really worked with him. That team was with Wagner and Livers. Most teams like that, when those guys come back to school, they're trying to improve their NBA stock, and they're taking bad shots, and they're trying to do things they're not capable of doing. That team last year just had chemistry like no other. So the younger guys right now don't quite have that, and they've had some losses they probably feel like they shouldn't have. Purdue's pretty darn dominant. It's going to be tough to beat Purdue. They lost to Rutgers right with the half court shot, but they're going to be tough. They're physical, they're athletic, and they're old, and that's a deadly combination. It's not the league it was last year. And we haven't even talked about Kofi Coburn. It's not the league it was last year, but it's still every night's going to be tough, and there'll be a lot of tournament teams.
Have you seen Illinois very much? I'm curious. I know Curbello's been out, but he was a guy I targeted in the preseason as maybe a potential first-team All-Big Ten guy, and he has not been great so far. I'm just curious what you've seen out of Illinois so far, and do you think they still have the upside maybe that we thought in the preseason?
They might, because it's Plummer, right, who's filled in and been sensational. I didn't know much about him, but the lefty point guard has stepped in. He's not turning the ball over. He can shoot it like he's one of the best shooters in the country. He had a couple of huge threes late against Iowa a couple weeks ago when Iowa was playing really well. But Kofi is such a force and capable of the 20-20. And so I think they're going to have a good year. And it's crazy, with all of the lack of success in the NCAA tournament last year. It's I don't know, having these big physical inside players just doesn't seem like it's working super well when you get to the tournament. But in the league every night, you have to have them or you're going to get crushed. And the teams that don't, like Nebraska, like Iowa not having a true post, maybe Rutgers, it's tough. It's tough to compete every night. Those guys are so tough and physical and skilled.
Jess, what do you have coming up just from an announcing perspective, what games you have coming up, and kind of where I know Indiana fans, I got a lot of good feedback on you calling the game the other night. You know, I think they appreciate you always talk about, it seems like you're someone that really has a pretty good feel from the historical perspective of what basketball means in Indiana. I think people really appreciate that when you're on the games. I'm just curious if we'll hear you on any more Indiana games in the future, and kind of what you have coming up here in the near future in terms of your schedule.
I'm looking at my schedule. I'm trying to find it right now. I think I have an Indiana game coming up in a month. Let's see here. I think on the January 26th, I have an Indiana game. Do you have the schedule in front of you? I'm not sure who that is. It's got to be a Big Ten game. But I love Indiana basketball. I've told my story a little bit before. I think talking to you, I grew up coming to the race, to the Indianapolis 500 when I was a kid. My aunt and uncle and cousins, the Hintz family, lived in Indy, and so we came out every year and you know, did the race thing, and went out the night before and filled the coolers with food, and then spent all day there. And we had the little pot at the table where everybody put in $1, and I'd pick Rick Mears and Al Jr. and Emerson Fittipaldi, and my dad was always like, "No, you got to go with Gordon Johncock. It's Gordon Johncock's year." So I knew that when I went to the 5-star camp, early 90s, I remember coming back from Pittsburgh, cutting through Indianapolis, and my Uncle Larry was a huge Hoosier fan. And so he'd tell me all the Hoosier stories. And I remember my Aunt Ann coming back from that camp once saying to me, was Damon Bailey at the camp? And I was like, Damon Bailey, who's that? And so, they explained the entire Damon Bailey. And so I read the Season on the Brink, and obviously Hoosiers, and Newcastle. I think I read when I was a kid, Newcastle had more fans on the season than the Indiana Pacers did. So that there was the real love there. And so much so that I came out one year and for the state tournament at the Hoosier Dome, and it was single class then, and it was packed, and watched the morning game, and then came back for the championship game. I think I can't remember right now who played in. I think it was one of the Austin brothers was in maybe won the title that year. So then obviously getting to play for Iowa and competing against Indiana was a dream come true, and to be able to play under the banners. And I don't think I ever won there. That back in that day, no one did. And to be able to get to know Coach Knight a little bit, it was awesome. And so the other day before I called that game, I think I said on the air, I was fortunate enough to call the Butler game the day before, and Bobby Plump, who's Jimmy Chitwood from Hoosiers, and the Hoosiers cast, they were all at the Butler game. And so I got to interview him on there and get to know Hinkle a little bit. That's the first time I'd been to Hinkle. So, kind of my Hoosier blood was flowing. And then I talked on the air a couple weeks ago, a guy by the name of Lance Russell and Jason Britt, who are Indiana grads, late 80s, and Bart Fox, who was a producer for ESPN and Big Ten Network. They were at Gibson's in Chicago, which is a steakhouse. And I just randomly walk in, and so because I know Bart, we worked together, and we had been wanting to get together for dinner, and just by luck, there they were sitting, and I went over and sat, and for 3 hours, they just downloaded on me on Hoosier hysteria and growing up and being on campus, and Coach Knight coming over to address the students every year, and you couldn't get in, and how just the amazing era that was, right? And the championships in 81 and 87, and then going to the Final Four, and Alan Henderson in that group, early 90s. It's just something that I could talk about forever. So on a game where Indiana's favored to win or there's a blowout, it's fun to be able to talk about that. Obviously, if it was a conference game, a guy couldn't tell those stories and connect with those people. But I don't think I've ever had more response on Twitter than I did the other night, talking about Bedford North and Sean Kemp and all those great high school teams and who's the best. I people from Indiana love that. I love it. and it just connected well, and I enjoyed calling the game.
January 26th, it'll be Indiana Penn State in Bloomington, so it'll be a conference game. So I looked at the schedule, and Jess, like I said at the top of the show, it's always fun to talk basketball with you. I appreciate the time, and I know that our listeners will definitely appreciate this episode and your insight. And thanks again for joining us. Hope you have a great holiday, and everybody. We will be back again next week with another episode of Podcast on the Brink after Indiana's game this weekend against Notre Dame. We'll have a lot more to discuss, see how everything shakes out there as we head into the end of the year and the resumption of Big Ten play. So we'll be back everyone will be back again next week with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.